Today's guest has been on my short list for literally years at this point. He's one of my favorite car journalists living today, and his cool, calm, and collected approach to enthusiasm is really unique in the automotive space. Of course, I'm talking about Henry Catchpole. Henry and I have several mutual friends, notably the gentleman over at the Gray NATO, while we also share a love for cycling and golf. Needless to say, Henry was primed for this podcast. I'm always excited to chat cars on here, and who better to do it with than one of the GOATs. I hope you enjoy it. I'm your host, Wesley Smith, and you're listening to the Standard H Podcast. Yeah, so according to Wikipedia, as an MP for Hereford in the 1300s, how was that time?
It was pretty pretty brutal, I have to say. Not so much cool for car journalism back then, actually, surprisingly, and rubbish at riding horses. So, right. Yeah, it was tough times, but it's got better in the last few centuries. So, yeah, thank you for asking.
That's great. Instead, where are you actually from?
Where am I from? Well, I'm from the UK, and
right.
I grew up down in Surrey, Cary Grant country.
Okay.
Went to school down there, lived in the same house all my younger years, and then disappeared off up to Scotland for 4 years at university after school, which perhaps we'll come back to about golf, because I know you're obviously a golf fan.
Well, not only am I a golf fan, and St. Andrews obviously is, Mecca, but one of my best friends grew up in Leeds and went to St. Andrews for undergrad. And I think I want to say he said, and I could be not remembering correctly, but my understanding is his dorm room freshman year overlooked the 18th green. Is that possible?
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. Yep. There was halls, which I think the university has sold them now, but when you look at the 18th green, that big red building, the old hotel there, that was student accommodation. So yeah, a friend of mine had one of the the turret towers, in fact, that looked out.
Wow.
So
wait, so when did you graduate St. Andrews?
2004. So yeah.
Okay, so you're 2 years younger than we are then, I guess. And then he, I think, went to medical school in Manchester, and now he lives in Canada. But yeah, anyway, but he's northern Englander. But Surrey, if I'm not mistaken, there's a huge car culture there.
Yeah, I mean, there's quite a lot of money down in Surrey as well. So it's and obviously we're not that far from Goodwood down there. So I went to Goodwood, before it was rejuvenated. In terms of, I remember going to the circuit when it was still very much just an old airfield with lots of rough hard standing there and no grandstands or anything like that.
Right.
Still some pretty cool cars there sometimes.
Yeah.
You get the usual thing you get at old airfields in this country. You get random track days and stuff. But yeah. And then went to I didn't go to the first Festival of Speed, but I did go to the second one. Which was quite a different, much smaller affair back then.
Now, and then there's the Festival of Speed, but then there's also the Revival, right?
Yes. Yeah, so the Revival came later.
Okay. Now, do those, remind me even, do they happen back to back? They're not at the same time, obviously.
No. So the Festival of Speed happens July time, generally June, July time. And then the Revival's usually September.
Okay.
So yeah, just a couple of months apart, and now we have the members meeting, which is generally earlier in the year as well. So you've got the three big meetings. Now,
are you going to all three then?
I generally do. Yes. Yeah. I still love it. It's there's nothing quite like it, and I've been very lucky. I feel like I have such an affinity with the Festival of Speed, because it's helped me out over the years, and I've gone from growing up looking at these cars and being enthused by what I saw to driving up the hill there in some of my hero cars. So it's quite a nice, it's a wonderful marker to have, and a plotting point. You go back every year, and it's a very easy thing to think how far I've come, or how much things have changed, I suppose.
Yeah. So do you come from kind of a car family? Where were you going to those events earlier, like with your dad or anything?
Yes, yeah. My parents were both. Sadly, we lost my father earlier this year, but
Oh, sorry.
my both my parents and my mother's very much still alive, and both car people met through the MG Car Club.
Oh, no way.
So yeah, my father had an MGA 1500, and my mother had a MGTF, so sort of just before. So although they look completely different, because my mother's was the last of the sort of the T types, but they both had the 1500cc engine in them, and they used to sort of do trials and all sorts of things like that, and we're still members of the MG Car Club, obviously, whilst I was growing up, and
Right.
I was brought home from the hospital after I was born. It was a very snowy December, and brought home in the back of the MG BGT, which they had at the time. And
So is that kind of like a 2+2 setup?
yeah, I think sort of 2 plus something else at the behind. Sort of, it was kind of it's not a lot of room back there, but yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. I was thinking about this the other day when people was like, "Oh my gosh, yeah, my dad still owns the 911 and I was brought home in the hospital in." And I'm thinking, how were you brought home in a 911? Like, were you literally just on your mom or dad's lap? Like, I don't like how responsible are these parents? You know what I mean? Like early days.
Isofix was just a twinkle in some safety person's eye at that point. So.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. Did your parents meet through cars then?
Yeah, basically. Yeah.
Really?
My mother and her sister were both driving back from work one day, and they'd seen this. I think my father probably had a TC at the time. I'm not sure he had the MGA at that point because he had various cars. And my mother hopped out to go and put a flyer for the local sort of meet under his windscreen. Hadn't realised that he was lying under the car at the time. The rest of they say is history.
Wow. That's incredible.
Yeah.
Wow, that's fascinating. In Surrey, so when I graduated college, my request for a gift was a Eurail pass from my parents.
Wow.
So I traveled around Europe a little bit by myself and visited some friends who lived in Europe, one of them being Chris, who went to St. Andrews. At the time, he was then in Manchester. But I was in Prague with 3 girls from Surrey that I met at the hostel. And we saw the sun rise, I'll say that much. It was fun times with those girls from Surrey. But anyway, that's another podcast. What is there a car that you haven't had seat time in, like specifically that you're like dying to drive?
I mean, yeah, there are definitely cars that I haven't driven. I've never driven a 2.7 RS, which has sort of it's weirdly become almost my staple kind of, if I could have one car, what would it be? And I've somehow taken to saying I'd have a 2.7 RS Beta. I could just drive every day and kind of, I'm not into it being pristine or anything like that, which is daft because, as I say, I have been in one, but I've never driven one. So
Right.
that's sort of, there are all sorts of things. They do, the pool is getting smaller. I have to say, but because I've driven.
I had it written down to ask you, which is kind of a foregone conclusion in certain senses, but you have a 3-car garage, but I'm going to give you the topics. You can't just fill it with whatever you want. One has to be a sports car, one has to be an SUV, and the other one has to be a sedan and or wagon, Avant, what have you, saloon car.
Okay. Oh, that's interesting. So, the SUV is probably the easiest one, weirdly, to get out of the way first, because I think I'd have some sort of Land Rover.
Yeah.
And which would be fairly obvious. And I'd probably have, for all that I love the older ones, I would probably have a new Defender, just because I have I really like that car. I was lucky enough to go on the press launch of it, and it was pretty much the last trip I did before COVID, which I suppose sort of threw everything. Had a long time to think about it, basically, and it was an extraordinary sort of few days. It was one of those sort of almost a throwback to the big press launches that used to happen that I never really sort of perhaps experienced them at their absolute height. But it was 3 days going around Namibia and across all sorts of countryside, and the thing absolutely stood up to everything that was thrown at it. Sort of, for all that I know, Land Rover has a reputation. This thing just took it all and was really good fun to drive. So yeah, that would probably be my SUV, I think. But it would have to be absolutely kind of proper base spec. None of this sort of speccing it up to kind of I want the as
the gritty one,
as basic, exactly, as it would come. So and the 110 as well.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, the 110.
Chuck mountain bikes and stuff in the back of it. Proper useful, and chop wood and throw that and all that sort of thing. So
sure. What color?
I'm kind of a sucker for that sort of RAF blue, actually. Although there's one somewhere, I haven't seen it for a while, so they've probably got rid of it. It was probably one of the ones that didn't work or something. But that was full on sort of UN spec, plain white, or Stormtrooper or UN spec, which looked really good when it was dirty. So, but yeah, probably have to be some sort of traditional Land Rover colour, I think. And I'm a sucker for that kind of RAF blue. So,
do you know Johnny Dowell? Do you know who that is? King Nerd.
Oh yes, I know. Yeah, only through Phil Toledano, listening to his podcast. So yeah,
he I think he's got a white Defender, or at least he used to. Yeah. Okay, so either sports car or sedan, wagon.
So yeah, so I would then it kind of throws it, because then you've got your sort of modern daily sort of utilitarian thing in there, so that frees up the sedan thing a bit, or quite a lot actually. So maybe I would go for I'll tell you what I could do. I could go for an I could go for the Alphaholics Giulia Super R that I drove very recently. God, that's a get out of jail, isn't it? I'm glad I came up with that one, because that is just one of my absolute dream cars. And the fact that it's in that Giulia 4-door body, I think is so cool, because it means you could, again, kind of turn up anywhere in that thing, and people would go, oh, that's a nice old Alpha. And those that knew would know, but you'd absolutely keep it like this one had its 1.3 badge on the back and everything, so it's proper sleeper. But what a amazingly cool car that is, because you could do everything in it. It's I probably would put aircon in it, sort of some sort of little electric aircon unit in, which they do, because the one I drove didn't have it. But yeah, other than that, I think that's my my saloon. And then sports car. So I've got that. Maybe I would go for maybe I'll go for an Ariel Atom 4.
Okay, that was a curveball.
Well, I think I've kind of got. I'm a big fan of the sort of the really like hardcore things. Sort of, I drove lots of. All I wanted to drive when I first got to Evo was a Caterham, so it kind of maybe a Caterham. But no, I think kind of, because I think it's the Atom does something a bit different than to kind of what we've got with the Alphaholics. So
sure,
and that would be just for an absolute, because it's so fast as well. Those things are just Looney Tunes. So almost whatever kind of hypercar you can think of, pretty much, that will give you
that feeling.
That feeling kind of thing. So and you can have it obviously with a manual as well. So
I love that.
Yeah, maybe that sort of, that feels like it's covering an awful lot of bases. And I know I haven't got an absolute sort of hypercar, supercar in there, which or even a Porsche, but yeah, I feel like sort of today, this evening, when we're recording this, that's my answer. So if we record this again tomorrow, if the recording doesn't work and we come back and do this tomorrow or something, then it'll probably be completely different. But I'll go for a a Cayenne and an M3 Touring and a something else. I don't know, but there we go.
Right,
No,
right.
but yeah.
Yeah. No, that's great. I love that. And there's a couple, the alcoholics thing is, yeah, I wouldn't have thought of that myself, honestly. That was, that's a good one. What are you currently driving? Like, what's in the garage now?
So I currently drive a Clio 182. It's just got through its MOT. Yes, it's
Nice.
these are a couple of advisories, but we'll sort those out during the year. It's made it through, so that's fine. So yeah, I rattle around in that most of the time, and I genuinely do as well. I think people probably think that I'm in a succession of press cars, which at the moment I'm really not. So yeah, it's a bit loud, a bit bouncy, needs a couple of new rear dampers, but I love it. I really do.
That's great.
It's just fun.
What was the first car then, when you were 16 or whatnot?
My first car. So I learned to drive on my mother's Mark III Golf 1.3 CL.
Yes.
Which was incredibly slow. I don't think I'd realised quite how slow it was till I drove kind of like a Mark III GTI that still had absolutely no horsepower, and then looked up what I'd been learning on it. It had like 60 brake horsepower or something. And I still maintain though the fact that I managed to teach myself to heel and toe in that. If you can heel and toe in one of those, then you're pretty much sorted, I reckon.
Right.
Because you won't find much with sort of worse pedal spacing.
Right.
But my first car was really, it was a new Mini, so one of the first new Minis, RE51 DMO.
Sure.
And it was wonderful. It was sort of, that's what I went up and down to St Andrews in, sort of with all the stuff, clobber in the back, and used to go across to the west coast of Scotland in it, and find out all the roads that I'd read about in Evo and stuff. And it was quite it cleaned me out of the sort of inheritance I got from my grandparents at the time, but it was absolutely worth it. And I devoured all the sort of the stuff that you could read about it at the time, and it was absolutely brilliant.
Oh, that's great. Do you have a favorite driving road then?
I've sort of been on record probably as saying sort of the old military road up through the Cairngorms in Scotland is definitely definitely right up there amongst my favorite. I love Scotland.
Sure.
It is wonderful. And yeah, there's something about the roads that we have here that are particularly testing, I think, and sort of lumpy and bumpy and awkward, and probably give chassis engineers absolute nightmares most of the time, because they're not like the rest of the world, and they definitely don't suit every car. But when you find a car that does suit them, then it brings the whole thing alive. And I suppose it's sort of it's a bit of the sort of the rally side of things that I love and all that. So yeah, I think one of those sort of roads would be the first bit's fantastic, all sort of lumpy and tricky, and then it opens out and it's a bit quicker up the top.
Sure.
So yeah.
So I mean, I guess as a journalist, automotive journalist especially, and in and out of press cars, even though they're not really prevalent now, as you say.
Yeah. Well, I still get my fair share, don't
Sure.
I?
Sure.
Yeah.
But like, what's a typical day like for you?
I mean,
like, are you up early because of the kids, or are you up early because you're an early riser, or neither? Do you get up later?
So I tend to work late at night. That's sort of if I'm going to be, and there's in some ways there's no such thing as a sort of a typical day, because I suppose it's split into two. Either I'm out shooting and filming stuff for, well, it's most of the stuff I'm doing at the moment is for Haggerty, so that takes up most of my time. So if we're out filming, then we'll be up pretty early.
Right.
This time of year, it's not quite so bad because the days are getting shorter, but it could be up, I don't know, 4 or 5 in the morning sometimes, depending where we've got to get to or what we're doing. And then we'll be generally out until sun goes down, and then we'll go and grab some food and go to bed and get ready to do it all again, sort of thing.
Right.
And but otherwise, then I'll be at home, and I'll be sitting looking at the laptop, writing the generally looking at myself on a screen, which is never a particularly nice thing to do, but sort of going through all the stuff that I've said to camera and then cutting that down, piecing it sort of together, not doing the actual edit because I don't have the skills to do that. That's where Glenn comes in and makes the magic happen. But I tend to write out all the time codes for what I've said and then match it to the voiceover that I'll then write. I'll then record that. And yeah, we sort of between us then put it all together into some sort of final structure which he makes work into a film. And then other than that, I might be writing something for Evo, or I might be writing the descriptions and titles and stuff. So yeah, it's a very mixed bag. I'm either out or very much not.
Yeah, and I love that, because then it's like if you've always have something new and different to work on, it's kind of easy not to get bored. You know what I mean? Like,
yeah, I've always been a big fan of contrast. I think it's one of the in so many sort of walks of life, really, that contrast means that, as you say, you appreciate everything else a bit more. I think because you can not get bored of it.
Right. So when you're shooting a car with Haggerty or whoever, are they usually multi-day shoots, or is it most often one-day shoots? I mean, obviously things like the weather or something could get in the way, but
yeah, and it really has this year. It seems to be typical that every time we try and book in a 2-day shoot, you can guarantee the first day will be wet and the second day will be sunny.
Funny.
And if we've got a 1-day shoot, you can guarantee that the morning will be wet and the afternoon will be sunny. So, which is always fun. Again, we've tried, because we've had a little bit more time with the Haggerty stuff, because we're doing 26 films a year. So we'll try and sort of do a minimum of 2 days for a shoot, just because it's sort of it really helps having that extra time. It's not a case. I think I've always said that if people said, okay, right, given all the budget, what would you go and do? What film would you go and shoot? And it's not a case of having the budget for better equipment or anything like that. It's always about giving ourselves the luxury of more time, because that's what really helps make a film better, I think. But a lot of the time that's not what we get. If it's on a launch, then it could be, here's the car at 9 o'clock in the morning, you've got to have it back by 5 on pain of death, and you've got to go and find the road in a country you've never been to before and get something together. And that's I sort of there's a certain challenge in that which I quite enjoy, but also it's more pressure now, definitely, that the films, that there's an expectation that all the films we do, because we're doing fewer of them, have to be of a certain level, whereas perhaps in the past you could get away with sort of saying, right, this film's not going to be, it's going to be of that level, and we'll just you work with what you've got. But it does vary quite a lot in terms of the time we get.
That's kind of cool though, because it's kind of strike mission sort of run and gun sort of status. But I don't know if I've talked about this on the podcast before, actually, but I used to be a car broker for movies and television, where I would place cars. Oh, really? And the one thing, and I'd be on set intermittently, not often, but what was interesting is they would always have water trucks that would wet the pavement, because the lighting is always better. So usually if you look at so those of you who are listening, if you look at a car commercial, or anytime there's a car scene in a movie, 99% of the time the pavement's wet. And I think it has everything to do with the lighting and the reflection of the light, and it's just it makes it more dramatic.
Tarmac just looks smarter, doesn't it, when it's
right, and it's just darker. There's usually contrast, because usually the colors of the cars, especially a press car, is usually kind of bright. So it's good to have like that dark, sort of tone underneath. But I guess you have your own free water truck, right? If it's raining,
obviously.
So then...
Yes, yeah, absolutely. It's it's cost of thousands when we go out. No, it's
right.
Generally so most of the time it's just me and Glenn. Sometimes now we will try and get a second person along to be a second camera person. That's particularly helpful. If we've only got one day, then obviously having two people to shoot, then that makes a massive difference, and is really helpful.
Sure.
But yeah, we are very small and nimble, I think is how we say it.
yeah, very agile. We like that. But as far as like the wet pavement goes, though, do you appreciate that for the shot, or does it just become a nuisance because it's raining, so to speak?
Yeah, most of the time it's just a nuisance because it's
Yeah.
raining, and the
Yeah.
sort of the things like tracking shots and stuff like that. Cameras getting
Yeah.
wet, water on the
Right.
lens. It's you have to keep cleaning the car as well. So yeah, for our stuff, we would definitely prefer it to be a dry day.
Yeah, for sure. So you mentioned Evo, obviously
Mm.
Haggerty. What are your relationships like with each company? Are they very similar or are they kind of different? I mean, obviously, one's text and one's video, but
Yeah. It's yeah. I think I have a pretty good relationship with both ones. Obviously, I've Evo is sort of ingrained in me because that's where I started out, and I don't do anything like as much for them these days. But they're only it's the reason I'm in the part of the country that I'm in now. Going back to your earlier question, I'm right in the middle, sort of about an hour or so north of London, and I'm in this area because that's where Evo magazine was is. So yeah, I think it's kind of, and I suppose the way I approach cars, I don't approach cars differently for either outlet. To be honest, that's they seemingly come to me because that's what they want. So
sure.
yeah.
But are you considered like a contractor for both, or are you an employee by both, or like how's that?
No, I'm freelance these days. So yeah, I'm very much contacted by Haggerty. So that's I have my contract with them to provide a certain number of films per year, or once every other week, and then Evo, it's on a much more sort of as and when basis.
So when you grow up reading Evo, did they call you for your talents, or did you submit, did you
Oh,
submit work to them? Oh, like how did you start? Because it had to have been a dream come true, right?
Yeah, it was absolutely. Yeah. I so I remember the first issue of Evo coming out in 1998, so 25 years ago, and it had the Maserati 3200 on the cover, and it was obviously a lot of the people who'd been on Performance Car. When they shut that down, they moved over and started up Evo, and I didn't really read Performance Car that much, but my best friend at school, Bruce, his father, I think, actually bought a copy of this new magazine. Bruce nicked it off him, I nicked it off Bruce, and I just remember reading it and thinking, wow, this is the kind of motoring journalism that I want to do. It was the whole package. It was beautiful to look at.
Sure.
It seemed to take that much more care over the photos and the layout and stuff, and was more expansive in the way it talked about cars, and was talking on a level that I really appreciated, sort of not in a condescending way or anything like that, or a sort of but it was just, perhaps there was a little bit of assumed knowledge in there, but only in terms of making the copy flow and make it that much more involving, I think. So yeah, that was where that's what I thought. Yep, that's what I want to do, and I did various bits of writing for sort of competitions. There was the newspaper over here, the Daily Telegraph, and they ran a motoring journalism competition, which
cool.
I entered, and I think I was shortlisted or something like that. I certainly didn't win or podium or anything like that, but I milked that, highly commended for all it was worth, and used to write sort of columns occasionally, and sort of then I got work experience at Evo, sort of wrote to them, having met Harry at the Festival of Speed actually, and he ignored me in the first year, but persevered. Second year I got week's work experience, spent most of the week, I think the most exciting thing I went in during the first 4 days of the week that I was there was a Citroen C5 diesel or something like that, and that was just to go to the local supermarket at lunchtime so we could all go and get some. We all piled into it and took the dangerous one interesting right hand bend on the way there, see what it's like, test the chassis, and then the final day I went out and joined Andy Morgan, who was doing some photos of Dickie Meaden in a BMW 330CL, it was, purple, up on the local roads, and then we went back in the Subaru, and that was much more kind of, that was my glimpse into actually what, I suppose, as we were talking earlier, you're either doing one thing or the other, so I spent most of the week, it was a slight imbalance, but I did see both sides of the coin in terms of, some days they're out and about driving and taking photos, and a lot of it's in the office, proofreading, or for me making tea and coffee and stuff. So
right, right. So what did you study at St. Andrews? Was it like literature or like creative writing, or like what were you studying?
No, I went there and very sensibly decided I'd go and do philosophy and art history.
Okay.
So actually, I went there to do philosophy and modern history. Then decided that I wasn't really doing the kind of modern history that I wanted, but because of the way the system works, there we had to take other modules as well. And I'd done a couple on art history and really enjoyed it because it's basically catchphrase. You just say what you see, and I felt like I was learning something new, and thoroughly enjoyed it. So switched codes and did philosophy and art history, and I did manage to do my dissertation, which was on the art history side, and I did that on the BMW art cars.
Oh, no way.
Which was I somehow managed to swing that. I have no idea how, but and it was right pain actually, because there was nothing really written about them either, which was quite fun, but I had a very short bibliography. So yeah, that's what I went and studied up there, as well as playing an awful lot of golf.
Oh, that's
and
cool.
Learning how to Scottish dance and things like that. So
Right. Oh yeah, we'll get to the golf for sure. How much autonomy do you have in your writing, as far as like when you're reviewing a car or even filming for that matter? Like, are brands telling you kind of bullet points that like, please include XYZ, or is it just like, hey, here's the car, go do your thing, just be honest?
Yeah, absolutely. And I absolutely wouldn't do it any other way. I mean, obviously from
wonderful.
That journalistic background from Evo, that's how I was brought up, and I suppose that's something I've really tried to carry through in recent years as well. It's sort of and I'm not about to throw shade at anybody for any way that people do things, but for me to stay sort of, and I think it sort of may have become tricky at one point, because you could see manufacturers thinking, well, we've got people over here who will say absolutely what we want, and why not just invite them to produce very good content and say toe the party line effectively. But I like to think I've kind of stuck to my guns and been a journalist, motoring journalist throughout, and will remain critical about stuff I don't think is so good. I mean, I'm very lucky in that obviously a lot of the cars I drive are you're splitting hairs, particularly these days, because there aren't really, to say there aren't many bad cars is wrong or sort of irritating, I know, but what I do is a very privileged position, and I get to drive the really good stuff, which is very rarely sort of, it might miss the mark perhaps from what you think it ought to be, but that doesn't mean it's you're not going to have a good time driving it. So and it's also, I think you always have to be careful as well, which is it can be a strange thing, because you can end up being less critical than you think you might want to be, because I've always again tried to be very objective for a lot of it, because that's what a journalist should be.
Right.
So something like an SUV that might not be my cup of tea, equally I have to, is it doing what it set out to do? And should I appreciate the fact that there will be people out there, potentially quite a lot of people out there, for whom this is their dream car, and for which it will do exactly what they want. So there's a bit of getting into the mindset of what is this trying to achieve, and will the people that are probably watching this video because they, this is what they're considering perhaps buying or dreaming about or whatever, is it fulfilling their wishes rather than mine?
Right.
So yeah, but there's no sort of, there's definitely nothing from the manufacturers saying you have to say this. Obviously we sit through the press conference and I'll read all the information, and you want to get all those things right, and there's a certain amount of what they're going to tell you about the car and what is new. Well, you want to relay that because that's what people want to know about.
It's reality.
There's no point in me skipping over it, because that's kind of what but you can certainly weight it in different ways, I think.
Do you have a favorite journalist other than yourself? Like, whose work do you appreciate?
So, I mean, I always used to love reading Peter Tomlin's Car of the Years when he was writing those for Evo. He just had a lovely apparently incredibly easy way of writing that was it was beautifully written, but somehow not sort of nicely conversational and not too serious, but got all the information across, and you just felt like you were there. But then also, I never met him, but Russell Bulgin is somebody whose writing I find, if I'm if I'm struggling and I need some inspiration, not because I'm about to try and emulate or copy his style, because I think that's nigh on impossible. But he's just, his way of looking at things as well as his way of writing was something that I find very very inspiring. And otherwise, I suppose people like sort of A.A. Gill, again, none of those people I love going to go and dip into some of his writing, which is not car related necessarily, but equally something I love reading. And then the other side of it in terms of journalists is obviously I hugely admired the driving talent of pretty much everyone at Evo, and that was something that I was so lucky to. That's something you can try and copy, because that's something you're not sort of worried about being too much like John Barker or Richard Meaden or something.
Right.
You soak up all that you can, and I was lucky that I got to sit next to them in a lot of cars when I was first at Evo, sort of just generally running the timing equipment and stuff like that. But luckily I don't get car sick, so I could just sit there and watch everything that they're doing, the steering wheel, pedals, how smooth they're being, what they're doing, the gear changes, how the car feels, front wheel drive, rear wheel drive, all wheel drive, all these things, and just absolutely immerse myself in the driving techniques that they had.
Right.
And they were and are hugely impressive to sit next to and watch, because they are jumping from, like we said before, there's often not a lot of time. You might have 5 cars and you've got to try and lap them all within the lunch hour at Bedford Autodrome or whatever and get a time out of them. So you're jumping from sometimes similar cars, sometimes not very similar cars, and you've got to instantly lock into how that car wants to be driven, how you're going to get the best out of it, and be straight on it for maybe 3 laps to get a representative time out of it. And that's hugely skillful. So it was amazing privilege to watch all that.
Oh, that's interesting. So from time to time, I'll think of questions after recording a podcast, of course. And I'm like, shit, I wish I asked that, or, what have you. Are there any reviews that you can think of top of mind that you were like, oh, I left this out, or I wish I had said this?
Oh, yeah.
Now's your time. Now's your time. You get to share. Is there like a recent example?
Oh, man. I mean, it's kind of, there's stuff sort of, even in sort of recent films, there's stuff at the moment where sort of, we've been looking at stuff that we've been shooting for Haggerty, think, right, well, how can we improve it? What can we do? It's better. And some stuff we'd already shot. So I'm already looking at it going, oh, why didn't we, shoot? And we can't go back and shoot some of it because it was on a launch or whatever. So you're looking at that thinking that would be, you just have to do the best you can with what you have shot. And I don't think they're not going to be bad films or anything like that, but you just kind of think there's always that thirst of thinking, yes, I wish we could have done more. A lot of the time you don't have a choice. You can't, it is what it is. You can go somewhere. I think we try and do it a bit more now. You obviously never prejudge a car, but there are ways of trying to at least set out maybe the start, the intro to a film, that certainly doesn't, it just asks a question perhaps, and how you answer it's obviously still up for grabs. But there was certainly when I started, I sometimes spend a lot of time thinking, right, this film is going to go in this way, or let's go and go to this road, and I'll say this here and that'll be great. And then you turn up there and the road is closed on that particular day because somebody's decided they want to relay some tarmac or something like that. So then everything you thought goes out of the window, or you turn up and the car's not what you thought it was going to be, and you're just like, this makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. So you have to, and that's the point, you have to be very conscious of the fact that you need to not stick to the plan, because it will it's wrong. You know, you have to just abandon it, and all that those hours you sort of tried to put in beforehand, almost as a safety blanket. You just have to accept that it was worth doing, so you went out there and didn't lose sleep before you drove the car. But
right,
just ignore the whole thing. So
well, I guess you could sort of double back too a little bit with the narration, I guess, like because you've got that lead time. So like what's your total lead time usually, like between filming and launch on YouTube?
So it's been quite hand to mouth at times this year. So we'll shoot one week and have to deliver by the end of the next.
Okay.
So yeah, which is a tighter turnaround than it sounds, because certainly with the bigger edits, you know, it'll take Glenn 2-3 days to edit. Sometimes we can get it turned around even quicker if we're up against it, but you'll probably it will have to be a slightly more basic edit in areas. Whether people notice it or not, I don't know, but
sure.
But yeah, you can definitely, and it is lovely to be able to save stuff with voiceover. So if I have forgotten stuff, it goes into the voiceover, and that's fine.
Right.
There is only one shoot over the years that we did have to save entirely with voiceover, because some camera equipment got nicked on the side of the road. So that was
unreal.
That was quite an interesting shoot, but
yeah. Now, how did you pair up with Glenn? Or was that like Haggerty put you together, or like how does that work?
No. So that was through Carfection, where I was before, and Glenn was freelance. And when this whole sort of when Carfection sort of was pulled the plug and Haggerty came on board and all that, and it was thankfully all dovetailed very well. And they sort of said, "Who do you normally work with? Sort of what's the production?" And I wanted to work with somebody that I was used to working with and knew was great, and also have that consistency, so that, you know, we could actually be a team. And I wasn't there are lots of great videographers out there that I've worked with, but it's nice having the consistency of the two of us sort of on it the whole time.
No first date vibes.
No,
getting to know you bits. Yeah.
No, we're I'm probably much more like an old married couple than
right.
a lot of the time. So yeah,
right.
I'm sure he tears his hair out at me a lot of the time, I'm sure. But there we go.
Has there been a car recently that you've either driven and or reviewed that's like politely surprised you?
Ooh,
in a good way, obviously.
Surprised me in a good way. Yeah, obviously, yeah. I need to go back and have a think about that. I mean, the one that obviously stands out from this year that surprised me perhaps even more than I could have thought it would is the McMurtry, which is just, I mean, absolutely extraordinary in terms of what it does, which is it's this electric car with a fan assist downforce, and I'd been trying to sort of get a drive in it for some time, and ended up being the first person to really test it sort of in the corners and stuff like that. And it will pull, it has 2,000 kilos of downforce at a standstill, and we actually made a mistake doing that as well, because we had this idea of it was on the big steering pad at Myra, and we thought, right, we'll have this big constant radius circle, and you can try it with the fans off and then the fans on, and it will be, you know, obviously a good visual demonstration. You can hover a drone over the top and see the difference in speed, but also gives me a nice chance to just, you know, you only don't have much to think about really. You've just got one corner. The problem with that is that, and it's something that I suppose I couldn't really have predicted, because I wasn't used to the sort of G that I was going to be pulling, but when you're pulling 3G and it's constantly in one direction,
yeah,
that is just, you just feel like you're melting into the side of the car. And it was much better actually when we had the little sort of figure of eight. Well, it's quite a big figure of eight, but it made it feel very little. Figure of eight circuit, because at least then it was peaks and troughs in terms of the G, and it's one way and then the other, and sort of you can kind of it's not such a big pressure on or toll on your body. But yeah, that was that was just extraordinary. Just like, I mean, what a car. But yeah, I think Aston DB12, that was a very pleasant surprise recently as well, actually. Much more much more of a leap on from DB11 than I think you would have thought. And again, if you look at the press sort of spec of that car and what they're sort of saying, and again, you look through that and they trumpet, it's the first EDIF in a DB car. Well, that's not really anything to write home about in a car that costs that much money, and it's an EDIF is something that's been around for an awfully long time now. It's not a sort of as much as you dress it up and say, look at this, it's a new. It's not a new thing, and a lot of what's in that car isn't particularly new. But the engineers that come across from somewhere in Italy where the new Aston boss used to work have worked a certain amount of magic, I think, and they've just tweaked the whole thing. They put an awful lot of thought and effort and engineering know-how into it and made it into something where certainly the mass feels much more centralized in that car now, and it changes the whole feel of it. So yeah, that was a really nice surprise to get into that and find it being that good.
Sure. Well, I loved your comparison of the GT4 RS with mountain biking. I don't know if you recall saying that, and you mentioned bikes
GT3
earlier.
GT3 RS, I should say.
Oh, that was a 3. I thought it was
the 3 RS because it had the twisty the variable dampers for bump and rebound and stuff. So I think I was watching the video recently, and I think it was it the Tail of the Dragon that you were driving on? Yeah.
I
did. No, I did. Yes. No, you're right. Okay. Yes. Yeah, because I did.
Because you were talking, I think, more of the cornering.
I have such a small pool of analogies to draw. I clearly rely on mountain biking. But yes, no, because I remember there was mountain biking in that as well, because it was kind of railing the big berm-like camber corners and that. So yes, sorry about that. Yes.
No, that's okay. But I relate. I raced mountain bikes in high school, and so like mostly cross country. I've never been like a downhill guy, but I'm just kind of curious, like how much time are you spending on two wheels?
Not as much as I'd like these days, but I stopped racing my road bike a few years ago now. So I don't know what it was, probably 3-4 years ago now. So it's been a sort of, and I felt, if I'm perfectly honest, felt slightly lost after that, because I didn't quite know why I was going out on the bike, which is a strange thing, because I love riding my, and I still knew why I wanted to go out on the mountain bike, but that just took a bit more time and effort, because the trails are a little way away, so you've got to put the bike in the back of the car, you've got to go off there. It's more time intensive. Sure. Whereas I'd been used to just going out the front door on the road bike and go out for an hour and but train. I was out on the road. I was there for a reason, because I was racing, albeit at it's perfectly amateur level. It's only for my self gratification, but it was fun. I knew what I was doing, and when I stopped doing that, I wasn't quite sure, to the point where the whole gravel scene had sort of exploded in the UK. I know it's been sort of in the rest of the world slightly more. And I was writing for Cyclist magazine at the time, so I did quite a lot of, used to go and do a lot of their classic climbs. So I'd disappear off to the Alps or the Pyrenees for a week and go and bag as many of them as I possibly could with a photographer.
I didn't know that, actually. Wow, that's cool.
Oh yeah.
So you've done. So have you done Stelvio both in 4 wheels and 2?
I have, but I've only properly done it on 2 wheels, actually. It
looks brutal.
Actually, yes, I have done, because I have done it on 4 wheels, but the article I wrote when I went out there to do it was kind of not the Stelvio, because I did all the other passes in the area that people might miss by just going to Bormio and to do the Stelvio, and sort of saying, look, you don't miss out on all these other fantastic ones like the Fluella over in Switzerland, or the Gavia sort of just around the corner and stuff like that. So
right.
I've done the Stelvio. I did the Mortirolo. The day before we did Mortirolo in the morning when I had pizza, then went and did the Gavia that night just before it got dark, then went to bed in Bormio and got up stupidly early, obviously before everyone basically else gets up, went straight over the top of the Stelvio down to the famous side, and then cycled up that. So we were done by 9 in the morning or something like that.
Wow.
So yeah, that was a pretty big 24 hours.
What are your bikes of choice? Both road and mountain. What do you ride?
So I currently ride. Well, I have a Specialized SL5 S Works, which is still my road bike, on ETAP, which I love. I would like something titanium, but that's kind of down the road. And I still have my old Bianchi Vianarone 7, which is the first road bike I got, which I love, and that's it was the liquid gas colour, so it's a bit of Celeste in there, and I still have my Boardman Pro Carbon, which was which I still think is a really good bike. Probably did some of my quickest racing on that bike. It was, which is surprisingly cheap, but I put some half decent Dura-Race tub wheels on it from the sale, and that was good. So that still exists somewhere. And then mountain biking, I have a Mondraker Carbon Foxy R Carbon, which I love.
Cool.
26.5-inch wheels, and yeah, it's just it still makes me laugh. I still have my old sort of Trek 820 completely unsuspended mountain bike, which is the first mountain bike I bought when I was 14, I suppose, from Guildford Cycles. I made them take off grip shift because grip shift was all the rage at the time, and put rapid fire on it.
The Rapid Fire Plus, STX probably. Shimano.
Yeah, exactly. We wanted rapid fire, but grip shift was just. And grip shift to me never made sense.
I hated
Even
it.
age 14, I could tell it did not make any sense at all. So I made them take it off and put rapid fire shifters on, and I used to disappear off into the Surrey Hills.
My man, yeah. Well, mine was black and purple. My 820.
Nice. Yeah, mine was the sort of slightly oily, sort of almost like oil can blue. Colour.
Right. Yep.
So yeah, I still got that frame at home as well.
Yeah, this was like in the peak of anodized parts, which have obviously had a resurgence. So it was like purple everything, and I'm like not even that big on purple per se, but for whatever reason with that bike, I just, my valve caps and everything needed to be purple to match.
Because it was a rally. There was M-Trax at the time that had a load of purple stuff on their bikes, and actually, so my friend Dean Smith, who's the ace photographer and a really seriously brilliant downhill mountain biker.
Oh wow!
And he's sort of gone down the rabbit hole of getting a load of these older bikes and bring them back up and making them beautiful again. He's got an M-Trax, which looks
nice.
He sort of showed it to me the other day. I was like, all the memories come flooding back.
Yeah. So when we're talking titanium, like who are you thinking about building the frame?
I mean, again, I remember. For road bikes, I remember lusting after a Lightspeed. It was the sort of the Lightspeed Gazalo, which is hopeless. I'd never buy that bike now, having because it was designed for a 60 kilo Marco Pantani, not a 75 kilo Catchpole.
Right.
Because I'm not really a climber, despite being sent off by the magazine to go and do all these climbs. I'm really climbing is not my forte in terms of sort of race. I can sprint weirdly, which nobody thinks, but. Anyway, so yeah, I think I tried there was a lovely Linsky, which is obviously sort of Helix one, which was nice, but I'm not sure what I'd get in the end, but Lightspeed was probably just speaks to me because of. Again,
I mean, they just
look
look like
when I was growing up.
Titanium, right? Like that color is just like raw titanium with the yellow logo. Like it was
exactly.
It was cool.
Yeah, and actually I did a couple of times. I've done the Nürburgring 24-hour bicycle race.
Wow.
So I can say I have raced the 24 hours at the Nürburgring, but again, not on not on four wheels, on two. And
it was a little slower.
Just a tad. You did sort of 60 miles an hour going down the foxhole, which is quite scary at night.
Wow.
But a group of Evo readers were doing it and sort of invited me to come and join them. And the guy who was definitely sort of the leader of the team that first time, he had a Lightspeed, and looking at it in awe, thinking this was very, very cool. So yeah.
Well, all right, it's time to talk golf. What's in the bag?
So I mean, the fact is that at the moment, if the bag comes out at all, that's an absolute win.
That's a win.
Frankly.
Okay.
But so yeah, I'm still on Mizuno irons, Callaway driver, which is sort of I keep thinking I need to change. I made the mistake the other day of digging out my old. You remember the ERC2 Callaway drivers that had the springy face, and then got banned. And I love that club. That was absolutely. And I picked it out, and I was at the driving range. Oh, I'll take that down to the driving range next time I'm down there. And I one swing with that thing, and this thing rocketed off the face and just disappeared. And I was thinking, I should not have done that, because that's a club I'm actually not really meant to use anymore. So yeah. And then I have sort of I'm on a ping answer putter, so fairly traditional kind of putter for that. And then my wedges. So I have a very my father collected old golf clubs. I was very much, I had a golf club put in my hand from the moment I could stand, really. And we used to have 3 generations of his father and my father and me going around the golf course and stuff. So there are all sorts of weird and wonderful old clubs that I dig out from anywhere. And I've got this really cool, it's probably illegal actually, but wedge that's a sort of an old sand wedge that's just incredibly thin. There's sort of there's probably sort of no bounce on it whatsoever.
Okay.
But I absolutely adore that for sort of short game stuff. So
yeah, I have a 4-degree bounce lob wedge. Like I just love how just knifey it is. You can open it up, do whatever you want with it. So I'm assuming, do you know Neil Ferrier?
I do, yes. Yeah, we've only met the once, but yes.
Okay, because he's obviously from your neck of the woods, less mine, and but ironically, he now lives in South Carolina, and I grew up in North Carolina. So, I'm just thinking, like, the next time you're on the East Coast, like, the 3 of us should go play golf, because he's got a crazy golf background through his family.
Has he?
Yeah.
Wow.
So we chatted about that. We actually opened my podcast episode with him, like all golf talk. Like it was it's pretty remarkable actually.
I'll have to go back and listen to that again.
Yeah,
I've listened to your one with Eric Anders Lee, obviously, but
oh cool.
It's because I love his Adventures in Golf series is just
so
brilliant.
good.
So yeah.
I just watched the Breaking series from Pebble Beach.
Mm-hmm.
It's just so cinematic, so beautifully done, and obviously like the kind of spiritual side almost that they discuss, and it's really nice.
An irritatingly good host as well. It's
right. Yeah. So I guess you played a lot in college then, be it recreationally
I
or
grew
otherwise.
I got to play through school and then played an awful lot up at university, and it was wonderful because we were very lucky because the students there get a student rate, so we paid I think it was £100. I think it was less than that actually the first year I was there. It's £95 first year I was there, and that was your membership for the entire year. You could play on any of the courses up there, so there are or even more up there now, but there were sort of 5 main courses up there at the time, including the old course, and you got local preference tee times as well. So if you put your name into the ballot, because the main old course there is, I'm sure you know, but the you put into the ballot for the day before to get a tee time the day after, and it's a lottery.
Right.
And but there are certain tee times set aside for locals because it's not owned by the RNA, the big building behind it is a public course. So yeah, and even if you didn't get a tee time, if you looked out and it was a nice day and you'd sort of done all your work or you just didn't fancy doing it, you could literally pick up your clubs and you'd go down to the starter as a single, and they would match you up to the next 3-ball or 2-ball that was going out and was happy to have you along. And it was great because you met some fantastic people, and they might have been waiting, I don't know, 2 years to come and play the course, and this was their big time. But because you were a student there, you could help guide them around and show them the sort of the lines and any sort of bits of history that you might know about the course and stuff like that, and try and host them in a way, which was kind of fun because you got to play the old course again.
Yeah.
But yeah, new course was probably the course I played most.
I was going to ask you
yeah, I tried not to play the old course too much because I don't think it's very good for your golf. I had a sort of, I had a draw that was, verging on a duck hook a lot of the time, which is perfect for the old course. So you could boom a massive drive that looked like it, would curl back in, but as long as you stay left on the old course, you're fine.
Right.
That's the rule of thumb. And there's obviously nothing growing above about hip height anywhere on the course either. So it was, I would come back down to Surrey during the holidays, and a tree-lined drive was my suddenly absolute kryptonite because
debilitating.
I just didn't know how to kind of I've got to hit this thing straight. I mean, what on earth are you talking about? But yeah, the new course was just that bit tighter. And new is hardly new. It was only a few years behind the old course, really, and still laid out by a Morris. So yeah, that was. And then there's Jubilee, which was never. It was a bit longer, but new was, there was something about that that I liked. But I did have my best round ever was on the old course. So
really,
but I never had a par on the road hole on the 17th. Even my best round, which was, I think I had a 75 round the old course, and
wow.
I still bogeyed the road hole. So never managed that. But
so were you into golf again? You said you kind of grew up with it. Like, were you taking trips like up to Dornick or anything like that, or like did you basically stay around?
So we largely played obviously there because it was
why wouldn't you?
Your money, still students, you can have a lot of disposable income. But I did get to play. We would take trips up, so we had and we were going up to Pitlochry, which is a lovely little course. Boat of Garton, went up there and played, and did go up to Carnoustie actually.
Cool.
One day. That was a weird one. Four of us went down to the new course to go and play, and there just weren't any tee times, and one of my friends was there and he went, well, should we just go and play Carnoustie? And we all sort of looked at him and sort of went, sorry? And he said, well, yeah, I'm a member there because my father was a member there, and I get certain discount rates kind of that I can dish out during the year, so we could just jump in the cars and go up there because it's not very far away. So yeah, we that one afternoon went up to Carnoustie and had a round there.
I hear that's a really difficult course.
Yes, yeah, it is. It's fiendishly difficult. It was obviously the scene of Jean Van der Velde's implosion on the last, going in, standing trousers rolled up in the burn.
Yeah,
and, but it's. I don't think I played particularly well. I think I was level par on the par threes, but it was about my only. If you're looking for scraps of kind of comfort in a round, that was my good bit of that.
Wow.
But yeah, no, I brought up loving golf and kind of reading P.G. Woodhouse, all the golfing stories, the clicking a cut at Heart of a Goof, and things like that, which that was sort of a big part in loving literature in a way, I think, because my father handed these books over to me, and they're so wonderfully written that you can't help but just enjoy that regardless of the golfing side of it, and the wrecking crew and stuff like that. So
that's cool. Have you ever played a Pete Dye course?
No.
Okay. Well, if you hook
not
the
that
ball,
I'm aware of anyway.
Yeah, if you hook the ball, don't. Just if Pete Dye is the architect, just say nope. I'd rather not, and go play a Muni or somewhere. Like, just don't do it.
Yeah.
You can't go left on any of his courses, and they're just remarkably penalizing. Like, just in general. So we played the stadium course out in La Quinta, Palm Desert area.
Mm-hmm.
And I even pushed a drive right. So you're not supposed to go left. So I was like, okay, well, the miss is right. I was a foot from the fairway, and it's like the rough was just like, you can't get out. Like, you might as well just bring your 56, just chip it back out into the short stuff and go on about your day. I mean, it was like borderline not even fun. Like, I mean, it was just like, oh my God, like I literally can't make a mistake. So, I mean, it's quite the test in golf for sure. So you got to bring your A game, definitely.
Yeah,
but,
absolutely.
The other thing I wanted to quickly talk about was your watches. And it seems, I guess it was your Bronco. Was it the Bronco
Yes. Yeah.
review that you did?
Yeah.
I couldn't make out what you were wearing. I was like, is that a Seiko? Is it not? I don't know. It looked like a gray NATO.
Yeah. Yeah. It probably would have been a grey NATO from James and.
So quite literally a grey NATO. It was a grey NATO, grey NATO.
Yeah, grey NATO. Yeah, TGN grey NATO. So it's probably that.
Okay, so what are we looking at here?
So we are looking at that's a Scurfer.
Okay.
Scurfer Diver 1, and that's in fact the original design of those. Chap called Paul Scurfield, who's a commercial diver, saturation diver up north, and his sort of the backstory to them is that he had Rolexes, Comex, remembers when they were cheap and used to service them for other people. I hope I'm getting his story right now, but he eventually these all became obviously much too precious really to be using for what they were intended to be used for, and he thought, right, well, why don't I make my own dive watch? The irony of this is I'm rubbish at swimming, but I just love the story and the fact that this is sort of really is built for purpose. So it's 500 meters of water resistance quartz, and obviously screw down crown, and I just think it's brilliant. It's the quality in them is extraordinary. They are, I don't know what they are on the website. They're about £234, I think. So they are not sort of in the grand scheme of things an expensive watch, but I think it's just brilliantly is so nicely made. I love the fact that it really has been built. He genuinely he's built it because he does all this diving, and he's built the watch that will survive that. So
right. So is that your daily watch then, or do you have others?
I have various others. I sort of that's probably the one I wear quite a lot at the moment. I've got a G-Shock GA2100 which is a useless watch because it's obviously G-Shocks are fantastic, and the Casio is a style icon and all that. I'm not saying it, but it's the one I got had the sort of slightly rainbow tint to it. So if it's bright sunlight, you literally cannot see the time for love nor money. So you just might as well get your phone out. But for some reason, I looked at it and it looks great, and I like it. It's a bit different to standard ones. I've got that Casio calculator watch, obviously. Of course. I have a digital box watch from a box of Rice Krispies that I bought off eBay because I used to have one when I was 6 years old and I lost it, or somebody nicked it at school. So not long ago I managed to find one of those and paid 40 quid for something that was free out of a cereal box, which is daft, I know, but it gave me more joy.
It's amazing.
Whatever I would ever own, it made me so happy.
Yeah.
And I have a Bremont as well because I've known Giles and Nick over there for some time, so they sort of so that's a U251 jet, which I really like.
Those are super cool. In fact, Mike Pearson is today's guest that I launched this morning. Do you know Mike?
I don't. I know he works for he's Zodiac now, isn't he?
Well, he's at Zodiac now,
but he was Bremont because I think he weirdly I probably owe him a pint because I think he put me sort of in touch with James and Jason at some point for the Grey NATO for that sort of thing. So I think that's kind of that loop. Despite the fact we've never met, I know his name through that and all that sort of stuff. So yes, that sort of weird small world.
He's a force of energy, Mike. So if you haven't met him, it's only a matter of time. But he's the best. Yeah, he's great. Well, listen, Henry, is there anything else you wanted to promote or talk about? Because I've thoroughly enjoyed the conversation, man. It's been really, really fun. I appreciate you taking the time.
It's been great. Yeah, I've thoroughly enjoyed it. I don't know, really. Yeah, if people could go and watch the odd video on Haggerty or read an article on Evo or the Intercooler, then that would be great. I'd be chuffed to bits and spread the word and all that. But no, if you've got any other questions, then it's all good.
Yeah, awesome, man. Thanks. Well, listen, I'll let you get some rest. I know it's getting late.
So
man, thank you so much, man. This was awesome. And keep
Good
up the
stuff.
great work, because I love the videos.
Well, likewise. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, man. Okay. All right.
cheers,
Well,
Richard.
we'll catch up soon. Okay.
Yeah, definitely. All
Okay.
right.
See you. Bye.
Bye.
This wraps up this episode of the Standard H podcast. If you like what you heard, I'd love it if you'd share it with a friend or two. And if you have a moment, please rate and review the show, as it helps others discover these episodes. It absolutely helps far more than you realize. Shout out to Jensen Reed and Super Beautiful for the theme track. Thank you so much for listening, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.